I've been studying Japanese on and off for 7 years, okay? 7.
Are you okay? No.
4 years of studying it at uni and 3 years of self-studying. I believe I have enough experience waging war against the language, myself, and life to share my experience with you, and I hope you will find some of my tips helpful. Those 4 years at uni were a bit of a roller coaster. I found myself losing interest in the language quite often because the teaching pace was slow, and I started thinking of studying the language as something I must do rather than something I want to do, which of course slowed down my progression considerably. I've been faring much better since I started self-studying. With that said, let's start with goal setting. What is your goal for studying Japanese? Are you studying it as part of your degree and you want to pass your exams? Are you studying it for work? To watch anime without subtitles, to read manga in Japanese, to live in Japan, to talk to your partner in their native language, or to pass the JLPT? Figuring out your why is the first step to finding the right approach to studying the language. The second step is to figure out how many hours per week you can realistically spend studying. And my biggest tip for this is to go lower than you think. You might begin thinking, oh, I can do 2 hours every day after work. Oh, I can study 8 hours over the weekend. Unless you're someone who is very organized and very disciplined, you will probably start letting yourself down very quickly. So just be kind to yourself when you're setting your study goals and learn to be okay with being flexible if you have to change things. Also, and this is very important, self-studying doesn't work for everyone. Some people need an external party to guide them and to push them to study.
Turn to page 394.
So if you find that self-studying is not working out for you, that's perfectly normal and okay. And if you can afford to consider tutors and courses, then you shouldn't waste your time trying to do something that just doesn't fit you. Today, we're going to focus on 2 goals: studying to enjoy Japanese media in Japanese and passing the JLPT. I think quite often people confuse studying a language with studying a language to pass an exam. It's possible to have a good grasp of a language, comprehend and speak it fairly well, and yet fail a language exam. It's also possible to pass a language exam but not be able to actually speak the language. If you're a non-native English speaker, you might have heard of IELTS, which is the language proficiency exam I had to sit to get into my UK university. Even though I felt very confident in my English skills back then, I still attended a prep course and did mock exams. Because there are certain things that are expected of you and certain exams that don't really apply to real life. The same can be said for the JLPT. This video will be divided into 5 sections, and each section will address the 2 goals I mentioned. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's take a moment to talk about mentality. The hardest thing is to start. We all know this. What I found works best for me is to create a, let's say, welcoming environment that makes it easy for me to sit down and study. My textbooks have to be on my desk waiting. My study schedule has to be either stuck on the wall and staring at me or written down in a bullet journal and kept open on my desk. My stationery is there, the chair is comfortable, the light is good, and all I have to do is just sit down and start. I have to make sure that my room is clean and there are no chores waiting for me, because I am the type of person who will find any excuse to do other productive work that would delay me from doing the work I actually have to do. Studying a language is not a race, it's a marathon. Can I confidently say I'm fluent in English? Yes, but do I still make mistakes? Do I still learn new vocabulary every now and then and mess up my pronunciation quite often? Also yes, and I can say the same applies to my native language. You will never be done learning a language. So if you need to take a break, take a break. There's no point in feeling pressure to reach a certain level because someone else has reached that level in a shorter period of time than you. Of course, if you have to reach it because you have exams to pass or conditions set by the company you work for that you have to fulfill, that's a different thing. But if you are genuinely studying Japanese for yourself, then there is no point in stressing yourself out. At uni, I used Minna no Nihongo, Marogoto, and Dekiru Nihongo. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend them for self-studying. I think they are way more suited for studying in a classroom with other people. I've also used Basic Kanji book, which I never completed because this style of learning kanji just doesn't work for me. For self-studying, I've only used 2 textbooks, Shinkansen Master and Donna Toki Do Tsukau, Nihongo Hyogen Bunkei Jiten. If you're studying to enjoy Japanese media in Japanese, then the textbooks I've used won't be really useful to you apart from this one, which is pretty much a compilation of all the Japanese grammar you ever need, and it's great to have at hand to search for something quickly. However, I've been told that Genki is great for casual studying for beginners, and when you reach intermediate level, you can look into other textbooks like Tobira, Nihongo Somatome, and so on. If you're studying for the JLPT, I do think the best option is the Shinkansen Master combined with a good grammar dictionary like the one I mentioned before. I know some people enjoy making pretty notes and flashcards or writing the same thing over and over again. I personally can't be bothered. I could never be bothered, even when I was studying English. For me, I find it easier to learn words and sentences. However, that is a bit harder to do in Japanese, because if you stumble upon a sentence and you can't read the kanji, you're usually stuck until you consult a dictionary. So finding a way to memorize kanji is important. I'm also not a huge fan of vocabulary lists. I feel like they actually slow me down, which is why I prefer already made flashcards and spaced repetition, as well as just reading and learning words that way. If you are studying for the JLPT, you will have to do a lot of kanji drills. While if you're studying casually, obviously you can do it at your own pace. I found that for both, the best way to study is through using a good kanji app, which is why I would now like to introduce you to MochiKanji, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. What MochiKanji does is combine spaced repetition with a special algorithm that analyzes your learning history. It then generates your golden time, which is the ideal time for you to revise before you forget the kanji and vocabulary you've learned through the app. It has pre-made flashcards with kanji in its furigana, English translations, and example sentences, and it honestly can save you so much time. MochiKanji can help you memorize 1,000 kanji and vocabulary in 1 month. Once it's time to revise, you get a notification, and you just have to click on it and get started. The review quizzes are like games and include reading, writing, and listening. What I particularly enjoy about MochiKanji is the varied way it allows you to practice your vocabulary, which is perfect for preparing you for the JLPT. At the same time, it also makes studying fun because of its cute interface, so it's also ideal for casual studying. You can plant seeds in your garden, and they grow if you study for a number of consecutive days. You can also create a team with your friends and grow a garden together. It's honestly adorable. It's really easy to learn with MochiKanji even if you don't have a lot of time to spare. I use it when I'm commuting and it makes time fly. The app has a substantial list of courses covering N5 to N2, as well as job-related ones like IT and nursing, and courses covering Minna no Nihongo and Genki vocabulary. It can help you choose the most suitable starting course for you, or you can select your own. As you progress through your studies, the app will divide your kanji and vocabulary into 5 levels, from level 1, just learned, to level 5, long-term memory. And you can check each word level in the digital notebook. And of course, the higher your level for a word is, the less you review it. The app now has a new feature dedicated to practicing kanji from N5 to N2. You can select your level and practice the stroke order, which makes memorizing kanji easier. MochiKanji also has an integrated dictionary which allows you to search and save over 10,000 words. The dictionary will show you the word's meaning, reading, type, and an example sentence. So if you encounter new words while you're studying outside the app, You can just open the app and look them up there and then add them to your notebook. You can download MochiKanji from App Store or Google Play, and you can also access it on PC. If you're interested, I've included download links in the description box and the comment section. Thank you MochiKanji for sponsoring this video. Studying grammar can be quite tedious because to memorize it properly, you actually have to use it. And by that I mean making example sentences and doing plenty of grammar exercises. If you just learn the rule, but your brain doesn't learn how to make sentences on the spot with that rule, you haven't really learned it. Now, if your goal is to consume Japanese media, while grammar is important, you don't really have to drill it as much, because once you've acquired a good amount of vocabulary, you can understand quite a lot from context and emotion. Although, to be fair, in my experience, dealing with written grammar is far easier than dealing with spoken one, because you can actually see the structure. While when you're listening, at the beginning, you have to actively listen for the patterns.
Okay, see now, what I just heard? Blah, 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 blah.
So at the least, you should be doing a good amount of grammar exercises, so you will have the structures stuck in your brain. And at some point, you will want to know what sounds right and wrong without having to think about grammar rules. If you are studying for the JLPT, you need to be able to tell which is the correct grammar point that should be used in a sentence and to construct the given sentences in the correct order. You have to be able to do this under time constraints. What I personally did is that when I was practicing with the Shinkansen master, I timed myself for every test. And even if I didn't know a word, I didn't look it up until after I was done with the test. You don't have to know how to write every kanji, but I have found that for me, trying to incorporate new kanji into whatever I'm writing helps me memorize them better. Memorize not how to write them, but what they mean, and it makes it easier for me to recognize them in big texts. If you have a friend who's also studying Japanese, an easy way to make it fun for both of you is to chat in Japanese whenever you can. My housemate and I decided to keep diaries in Japanese, so every night we would sit down together and write and decorate them with washi tape and stickers, and then we would exchange them and read each other's entries. I found it very fun and relaxing, and I miss doing it dearly now that we live separately. The JLPT doesn't test your writing skills, so if you only want to pass the exam, you don't have to practice writing. But as I've mentioned, I don't think you can properly learn your grammar without using it. So at least you should be making example sentences with the grammar points for the exam. And if you don't want to write by hand, just make a Word document and write sentences there, which might even be better practice considering how most of the Japanese writing you ever have to do will most probably be on digital devices. This might be controversial, but for the love of God, you don't need Romaji. Use it when you're learning hiragana and katakana. The moment you learn those, ditch the Romaji. By the way, does anyone else hate katakana? I find it worse than kanji. It mostly has to do with the fact that katakana takes foreign words and twists their pronunciation, and I find my brain in constant battle with the correct pronunciation of the words and their Japanese pronunciation. Anyway, I aim to read either at my level or a level above, but never below. Manga, books, news, anything you can get your hands on, honestly. A very good resource is NHK Easy. I've also used Japanese stories for language learners. Something very important is watching Japanese content with Japanese subtitles. You can also watch non-Japanese content with Japanese dub and subtitles. That's how I rewatched Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Netflix. The best resource I found for watching anime with Japanese subtitles is Animelon. Doing these things should be more than enough practice if your aim is to understand Japanese media. However, if you are prepping for the JLPT, you do need to do more. The JLPT tests two things in its reading section: speed and comprehension. So my best advice is to time yourself, and when you're doing mock tests, don't look up words and make sure to read the questions first. Please don't forget that people in real life don't really speak the way anime characters speak. So if at some point you want to learn how to speak Japanese, You have to diversify the media you consume. There are plenty of free resources available on YouTube, and I highly recommend trying out some podcasts or just watching some Japanese YouTubers. For those prepping for the JLPT, focus on doing mock listening tests and listening to Japanese radio and TV. Japanese people tend to speak faster than exam recordings, so if you get used to listening to fast speech without reading subtitles, you will find the exam easier. At uni, we were only allowed to do a certain number of credits per term. And in the first term of my second year, there were a lot of politics modules I wanted to take. But that meant I had to sacrifice my Japanese classes. Now here's the punchline. To study Japanese in the second term at a higher level, I lied to my tutor and told them I took Japanese classes over the summer. And so she let me take a test between terms under the condition that if I did well, she would let me join them in the second term. Well, I procrastinated for the whole of term 1, crammed a whole term of language studying in less than a month, passed the test, and of course, when I joined the class, I felt so intimidated, and I was always worried people would find out that I shouldn't be in the class. 10 out of 10. This is when my fear of making mistakes and being judged with regard to Japanese developed. And I've struggled with speaking Japanese since then. Don't be like me. Don't be afraid of making mistakes and embarrassing yourself. Honestly, no one cares. You're just sabotaging yourself. It's easier said than done, believe me, I know, I am still struggling. Now, for the goals you're looking at in this video, mastering Japanese pronunciation and pitch accent is not really necessary. However, I do think it would be useful in the long run. So repeat what you're hearing, mimic as accurately as you can, and talk to yourself.
Je m'appelle, mais poupou!
The JLPT doesn't test speaking, but real life does. So at least get comfortable talking about generic daily life things. There is no best way to learn Japanese. You will find countless videos and articles giving you different advice. What's important is that you find the best way for you. If something is not working, change it, experiment. Don't just do something because you've been told it's the best. The last time I picked up a Japanese textbook was about a year ago. Life happens, priorities change. I had to focus on my law degree and other things happening in my life. And the last thing I felt like doing was studying Japanese. Yes, I've consumed some Japanese media in the forms of anime and news, but that's about it. So naturally, I have forgotten a bunch of stuff, and now I have to revise before I can start studying new material. Language is a skill that has to be maintained. I studied French for 5 years in high school. I was somewhere between B2 and C1, and I could write essays and converse with no issue. Now I can't string a sentence together. It is what it is. This should not demotivate you, okay? Just take things at your own pace. Journey before destination. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any tips for self-studying that work for you, please share them in the comments. Let's help each other out. If you want to hear more about my strategies for passing the JLPT, then you can click here. And if you want to hear about my experience studying in Japan, then you can click here. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.